Hello, amazing viewers. Prepare for a story of unexpected twists, poetic justice, and the transformative power of true character. He invited his cleaning lady to his extravagant gala, intending only to humiliate her. But when she arrived as a true diva, he realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Before we dive into this thrilling narrative, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from, and hit that like button to keep supporting us. Our story begins now. The tycoon's reckoning, a diva's unexpected return. Clara was on her knees, diligently polishing the cold marble floor, when she heard that unmistakable sound. The elegant, authoritative echo of Mr. Vance's secretary's heels resonating down the hallway. It was barely 7 in the morning, but Clara had already been working for 2 hours, as she had every day for over 3 years. In Vance Manor, where luxury clung to every doorknob, everything had to gleam as if brand new. The 42 rooms, the endless corridors, the majestic floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of Crestwood City. Everything had to be impeccable for the constant business visits of the great Ethan Vance. As he descended the grand staircase, Clara saw the owner of it all adjusting his designer tie in front of the mirror, phone pressed to his ear, discussing figures that, to her, were nothing more than smoke. At 45, Ethan was the face of a real estate empire that erected skyscrapers as if they were card castles. His surname opened doors, instilled respect and fear. Everyone knew who he was, and more importantly, they knew he liked them to know it. "I want every detail ready for Thursday," he ordered, without even looking at her as he passed. "The party has to be perfect. Exactly 200 guests. Not one more, not one less." Clara didn't look up. She remained focused on a stubborn stain near the dining room, probably expensive wine spilled at some business dinner. She had learned to disappear, to become part of the furniture, to live in silence. It was safer that way. That way, no one asked questions. "Hire more waiters," he said suddenly, now standing in the main living room's threshold, observing her with the intensity of someone studying a foreign painting. His gaze fixed on her. Clara felt it, as if it were stripping her bare. She slowly rose, her knees aching and her hands red. She wiped them on her everyday blue apron. Then Ethan's voice cut through the air. "Good morning, Clara. I need to speak with you." She nodded, her heart already uneasy, and began putting away her cleaning supplies. He walked over to the marble fireplace and stood staring at a painting hanging above it, the work of some European artist whose name Clara never bothered to learn. "Thursday will be the annual gala," he said without moving. "As always, you'll be in charge of the final cleaning before the guests arrive." "Yes, sir," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. But then his tone changed. "This year will be different. This year, you won't just clean. You'll participate." Clara felt her stomach clench. Participate? How? Ethan turned to her with a twisted smile. "As a guest." The words dropped like stones. In 3 years, no one in that house had treated her as anything more than part of the background, serving coffee, cleaning windows, never imagining something like this. "I don't understand," she murmured, but he was already beginning to pace around her, his hands behind his back like an impatient judge. "It's simple. You'll dress appropriately and attend the party. You'll dine at the main table, converse with my guests. You'll act as if you're one of them." Clara instantly knew there was a trap. Ethan was not a kind man. He never did anything without a purpose, and kindness from his lips tasted like poison. "May I ask why?" "Because I want you to learn something. I want you to understand your place in the world." The coldness in his voice confirmed everything. It wasn't an invitation. It was a sentence. He wanted her to feel out of place, ridiculous, inferior, and then humiliate her in front of everyone. "I understand," Clara said firmly, even though her chest pounded like a drum. "Perfect. I'll provide you with a suitable dress. Nothing costly, of course. I wouldn't want to embarrass myself in front of my guests," he added, then with an even crueler smile. "Oh, and don't worry if you don't know how to behave. I'm sure everyone will perfectly understand where you come from." The word origin slipped from his mouth with a disdain that made her feel as if she had been spat upon, as if she were a pet he intended to teach to sit and be quiet. Clara bit her lip. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. "You may leave. And remember, Thursday, 8 o'clock sharp. Not a minute late." He left, leaving her alone in that enormous living room, surrounded by luxury that didn't belong to her. Tears welled, but she refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't change anything. If you were Clara, realizing his true intentions, what would your immediate plan be? Would you refuse or embrace the challenge? Comment below. Don't miss a beat of this thrilling story. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel now. Ethan Vance believed he knew her. He believed Clara Hayes was simply a desperate employee who had knocked on his door 3 years ago begging for a job. But he had no idea whom he had truly hired. That very afternoon, while tidying the private library's books, Clara found something that changed everything. A simple piece of paper tucked between the pages of a contemporary art book, a magazine photo, an image that sent a chill down her spine. It was her, dressed in Valentino pink, smiling at a charity gala, surrounded by entrepreneurs, politicians, and celebrities. The caption was clear: "Clara Sterling, heiress to the Sterling textile empire, one of the most elegant women in Brazilian high society." Her fingers trembled. She closed her eyes. She remembered the camera flashes, the laughter, the greetings. She remembered what it was like to walk among the elite and feel like the world belonged to her. She remembered how, in a single night, everything crumbled. Her father lost everything, betting on disastrous investments. In 6 months, the Sterling family fell from the pinnacle to the abyss. Her father died of a sudden heart attack when creditors emptied every last corner of their lives. Her mother couldn't bear the grief. She died 2 months later. Clara was barely 26. She lost everything: her family, her fortune, her surname, her voice in the world, and those around her disappeared as quickly as they had approached when she was rich. She discovered that the business world showed no mercy. To fall was synonymous with vanishing, and so, 3 years ago, she appeared at the Vance Manor door with a false name and a sincere plea. Any job. Whatever it took. Ethan hired her to clean, and she accepted because she wanted to survive. But now, with that photo in her hand, she knew fate was offering her a revanche. He wanted to expose her, to humiliate her. Perfect. She was going to attend that party, but not as the invisible maid he expected. She was going to enter as Clara Sterling, the woman who once made boardrooms tremble, who dictated trends, who spoke with ambassadors and CEOs as if they were family. She tucked the photo into her apron pocket, slowly straightened, and smiled. The first genuine smile in 3 years. Ethan Vance had not the slightest idea what he was about to unleash. He thought he had invited a simple cleaning woman to his party, but what he didn't know was that the one who would cross that threshold was not just another employee, but one of the most refined and memorable women high society had ever known. That Thursday night, everyone would remember her name, Clara Sterling, synonymous with elegance, power, and a past that seemed dormant but never forgotten. How do you think Clara's hidden past will impact the evening? What kind of reactions do you expect from the guests who once knew her? Share your predictions in the comments. Don't miss this incredible transformation. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel now. At dawn the next day, Clara rose with a determination she hadn't felt in a long time. She had only 2 days to prepare for her return, her rebirth. She had no money for exclusive suits or dazzling jewels, but she had something even more valuable than all that: the intact memory of who she truly was. As she wiped down the large dining table, she heard Ethan talking on the phone from across the room. His tone was haughty, almost amused. "Yes, Robert will be there. It will be unforgettable," he said with a chuckle. "I have a special surprise for Thursday. Let's just say my maid is going to give us a lesson on social aspirations." Clara continued her task, gliding the mop over the mahogany wood, but this time with a half-smile playing on her lips. Ethan was so convinced of his victory, so sure he would humiliate her, that he didn't realize the woman before him was someone who had been educated in the salons of Vienna, who had learned protocol from the best etiquette masters, who spoke 4 languages fluently, and knew far more about art, music, and literature than any carefully selected guest on that list. She spent the afternoon reviewing every name on the guest list she had seen in Ethan's office. Many of them were not strangers to her. Robert Sinclair, the oil magnate who used to greet her respectfully at every social event. Maria Travers, the minister's wife, who once claimed Clara had the finest taste in art among the entire elite. Charles Montgomery, the banker who tried to close several deals with her father. Would they recognize her? That wasn't the question. The important thing was whether they would have the courage to admit, in front of Ethan, that the woman now mopping his floors had once been one of the most respected figures in the very circle they now claimed to represent. On Wednesday, Clara went in search of something crucial, a dress worthy of her return. She had saved every coin from her meager salary, but it was nowhere near enough to buy something appropriate for a gala of that caliber. Then she remembered Elena Marchetti, an Italian seamstress who had worked for the Sterlings for years. Elena lived in a modest little house in the city center, but her hands were truly art. She had designed some of high society's most iconic gowns, including several that Clara had worn in her prime. "Mamma mia!" Elena exclaimed, opening the door and seeing Clara standing before her. "Bambina, where have you been? I've looked for you so much." They embraced, and in the warmth of that small room, both wept silently, recognizing the pain and joy of reunion. Elena, now in her 70s, still held the same fire in her eyes as when she was the trusted dressmaker for the most influential women. "I need your help," Clara said bluntly. She explained the situation, avoiding the harsher details, but making it clear that this was a special occasion. Elena raised a hand, interrupting her. "Say no more. You are a Sterling, and Sterlings don't set foot in a party without looking dazzling." She led her to a back room where she kept her most cherished creations. There, protected from dust and time, hung a dress that took Clara's breath away. It was made of deep red Italian silk. The neckline was elegant, not ostentatious. The long, fine lace sleeves ended in a skirt that flowed out with a slight train. Hand-embroidered with golden threads, it looked like a painting transformed into a gown. "I made it 2 years ago for a client who never came to pick it up," Elena explained, her eyes sparkling with emotion. "I always knew it was waiting for the right person." When Clara tried it on, it was as if the dress had been created for her. It fit her body with the precision of a well-kept secret. It was perfect, neither too flashy nor too discreet. a statement of elegance that needed no words. "I can't accept it, Elena," she whispered. "This dress is worth a fortune." "Bambina, it's not about money," Elena said firmly, as she adjusted the dress's shoulders. "This dress is made for moments like this, to remind the world who you are. It's not a gift, it's justice." She also insisted on lending her a set of jewels inherited from her own grandmother, a natural pearl necklace with a diamond clasp, earrings that shimmered softly, and a simple but distinguished bracelet that discreetly completed the ensemble. "Tomorrow night, when you walk into that party, I want you to remember something," Elena said, taking Clara's hands in hers. "Class isn't bought, elegance isn't learned, and dignity, Bambina. No one can take your dignity away. You were born with it. You just let it sleep for a while." Clara left Elena's house with the dress carefully tucked into its garment bag and the jewels lovingly wrapped. But most importantly, she left with something she hadn't felt in years: confidence. She walked the streets with a firm stride, and as she passed a shop window, she paused. What she saw reflected wasn't a simple domestic worker. It was her, Clara Sterling, the woman who had once been the center of every gaze. What specific qualities do you think Clara will demonstrate that will truly shock Ethan and the other guests at the gala? Share your predictions below. Don't miss a single moment of this epic transformation. Like this video and subscribe to our channel now. Thursday erupted in Vance Manor like a storm of preparations. Decorators, florists, waiters, musicians, all moved in ceaseless motion, finalizing every detail for what promised to be the event of the year. Clara participated in the organization during the day, but her mind was far away, anticipating a moment far more important. At 5 o'clock, her workday ended. She ascended to her small, humble, functional, unluxurious attic room and sequestered herself there like a butterfly about to emerge from its chrysalis. She showered unhurriedly, savoring each minute as if she were washing away the wounds of the past. She painted her nails with a deep red polish she had purchased especially for that night. The dress glided onto her skin as if it recognized her. It was hers. The jewels provided just the right amount of sparkle, without excess. She swept her long hair into a low, elegant bun, leaving a few loose strands to caress her face. Her makeup was simple but precise, highlighting her green eyes, those eyes that always spoke for her, even in silence. When she looked in the mirror, her lips trembled. She couldn't help her eyes from misting over. There she was, again. The woman who had posed for magazine covers, the one who dined with diplomats, who negotiated firmly from the head of a table, who filled a room with her mere presence. It was her. It always had been. Only the world had forgotten. And so had she. Below, the clinking of glasses, the laughter, and the murmur of the first guests pulled her from her trance. It was time. She picked up the small handbag Elena had also lent her. She took a deep breath and opened the door. Every step down that service staircase was deliberate. Her walk was not that of a nervous maid trying to go unnoticed. It was the measured stride of a woman reclaiming her place. From the top of the staircase, she observed the main hall. Everything was light and luxury. Hundreds of candles hung like stars from the ceilings. The political, business, and cultural elite of the city were already mingling amidst champagne flutes and soulless conversations. And in the center, like a satisfied emperor, stood Ethan. Surrounded by false laughter and empty flattery, he enthusiastically recounted a story, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. It was then that Robert Sinclair, whiskey in hand, looked up and saw her. His glass hung suspended halfway to his lips. His eyes widened, and he uttered a whisper laden with disbelief. "It can't be." Beside him, Maria Travers turned her head. Upon seeing Clara, Her glass trembled in her fingers. Her eyes widened, and she brought a hand to her chest, unable to believe what she saw. Around them, one by one, faces turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Laughter died in throats. An elegant, heavy, and reverent silence began to envelop the room. Charles Montgomery dropped his fork. The French ambassador's wife urgently tugged her husband's arm, and the finance minister blinked, trying to confirm if this was real or a figment of his imagination. And then Clara began to walk. Every step was a declaration of intent. She didn't walk. She glided. She didn't hesitate. She reigned, with her back straight, her chin barely lifted, and a slight smile. The entire room parted for her, as if the sea recognized its queen. 200 people stopped talking to watch a woman dressed in red reclaim the throne that was once hers. Ethan noticed the shift in the atmosphere. His smile twisted, disconcerted by the gazes around him. He slowly turned, expecting to see his surprise, the maid out of place, whom he had so carefully planned to ridicule. But what he found left him speechless. "Good evening, Ethan," Clara said, with a serene, enveloping voice. "Thank you for the invitation. Very thoughtful of you." Ethan stared at her as if he had seen a ghost. That wasn't his employee. That woman didn't fit the gray uniform and household chores. That woman was Clara Sterling. Robert approached, his eyes still wide. "Clara Sterling! My God, it's really you. It's true." The name resonated through the room like an ancient bell, awakening dormant memories. "Clara Sterling!" As if someone had struck a match, whispers began to spread from corner to corner. Some remembered her well, others only the surname, but everyone knew what her presence truly signified. "Hello, Robert," she responded, extending her hand with all the natural grace in the world. "A pleasure to see you again." Robert kissed her hand as if it were a sacred relic. Still confused, he stammered, "But what are you doing here? Do you know Ethan?" At that moment, Maria Travers approached, tears of emotion in her eyes. "Clara, Clara Sterling, heavens above, you disappeared all these years. We looked for you at every event. We didn't know what had happened to you." And there she was, back among them, not as a shadow of the past, but as a firm presence, her dignity intact, like someone who should never have left. She had merely been waiting for the right moment to return. Ethan's face went pale. It seemed his brain was struggling to process what he was seeing. This woman who had cleaned his house for years was now surrounded by the city's most influential figures, treated as if she were a movie star or an old friend returned from a golden exile. He, who felt like the center of the universe at his own party, had been relegated to the background. They were looking at her, listening to her, admiring her. "Excuse me," he managed to say, his voice sharper than he intended. "Do you all know each other?" Charles Montgomery let out a brief, friendly chuckle, patting him on the back. "Do we know her? Ethan, Clara Sterling was one of the most influential women in all of Brazilian high society. Her family had businesses across half the world." Ethan repeated the name softly, not fully understanding. Of course, he had heard it before, but how did that fit with the woman who washed his bathroom? Yes, they had financial problems, didn't they? Clara nodded with a serene smile. She didn't need pity or justification. "It was a difficult time. My father risked too much in markets that didn't deliver as expected. Then came the global crisis, and we lost everything. But well, life goes on, doesn't it?" And then something in Ethan's eyes ignited. Not joy, but dawning comprehension. This woman he had scorned, criticized, and exploited for 3 years was not just any domestic worker. She was someone who, at another time, could have bought his house outright. Guilt settled in his chest like a stone. Heavy, cold, inescapable. The dinner began to be served at 9 o'clock. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Clara was seated at the main table. No hidden corner. Ethan had changed the seating arrangement at the last minute. Now she was between the French ambassador and across from Maria Travers. During the first course, smoked salmon with capers, Maria could no longer contain her curiosity. "My dear Clara, may I ask what truly happened with Sterling Industries? One day you were expanding across Europe, and the next, you disappeared." The dining room fell into a tense silence. Many pretended indifference, but listened to every word. Ethan stopped cutting his meat. Clara took a sip of red wine before speaking, with that warm voice that lost none of its elegance, even when discussing the harshest truths. "My father was a visionary, but you know how that goes. Sometimes visions blind us. He bet big on emerging markets, and when the crisis hit, everything came crashing down in a matter of months." "And your family?" Montgomery asked, genuinely. "Father couldn't bear the magnitude of the disaster. He died of a sudden heart attack shortly after. Mother fell into a depression she never recovered from. In 6 months, I lost my parents, and everything I ever considered mine." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was respectful. Several guests lowered their gaze. Others, like Robert Sinclair, shook their heads, visibly affected. "I remember Giuseppe," Robert said. "He was an admirable man. It must have been incredibly tough for him." "It was, but he always taught me that true wealth is here," she said, touching her chest. "In what one knows, in how one behaves, in what cannot be bought or stolen." Ethan swallowed hard. He remembered all the times he had treated her like a nobody. The curt orders, the dismissive glances, the subtle humiliations. "And how did you end up?" Maria asked, not daring to finish the sentence. "Working for Ethan," Clara said, looking him directly in the eye. The tension was palpable, but she didn't falter. "After losing everything, I discovered that friends in high society are like greenhouse flowers, beautiful when the climate is ideal, fragile when conditions change." The French ambassador frowned. "In my country, madame, we deeply admire those who face difficulties with dignity. That is where true character is revealed." "I entirely agree," the minister's wife added. "Clara, you have always had a class that goes beyond money. I remember when you organized that gala for vulnerable children. You raised $2 million in a single night." Ethan almost choked. $2 million in one night. His domestic employee. "Yes, it was a very special night," Clara said, for the first time visibly relaxed. "With that money, we managed to build 3 pediatric hospitals." "Hospitals!" Ethan exclaimed, unable to control the volume of his voice. "The Sterling family prioritized social projects," Robert explained. Clara personally coordinated many of them. The conversation continued to flow, and with each passing minute, Ethan sank deeper into his seat. She spoke French fluently. She commented on international politics with the ambassador and expressed opinions on art with ease. Those he admired nodded at Clara's every word. "Clara," Charles Montgomery said as the main course was served, "I still have that Monet your father sold me before the troubles began. It's one of the most valuable pieces I own." "Yes," she whispered, touched. Giuseppe wanted that piece to end up with someone who truly knew how to appreciate it. Ethan dropped his fork. Monet. They were talking about Monet as if it were a family heirloom. Who on earth was this woman? During dessert, Belgian chocolate with red berries, Maria asked the question everyone else had avoided. "Clara, what now? With your contacts, your history, aren't you considering going back into business?" Clara took a deep breath. "It's not that easy. The business world has a poor memory for success, and an even worse one for failure, and starting over requires capital." "Nonsense," Robert interrupted, hitting the table with enthusiasm. "You have what money can't buy, credibility. I would fund you without hesitation." "Me too," Montgomery added. "Your father was one of the most honest men I ever knew. His daughter deserves our trust." The French ambassador leaned towards her. "Mademoiselle, if you are ever interested in the European markets, I can introduce you to several investors in Paris." Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. In a single night, his employee had received more offers than he had in months, and not from just anyone, but from people with real power. "I thank you from the bottom of my heart," Clara said, genuinely moved. "But first, I have some personal chapters to close." The party continued late into the night, but for many, especially for Ethan, that evening became more than a social event. It was a lesson he would never forget. Clara moved through the room as if she had always belonged there, chatting with different groups, moving with an innate elegance that disarmed everyone. There was a quiet confidence in her voice, the kind of self-assurance not learned from books. Ethan watched her from afar, growing more bewildered with each passing moment. It was impossible not to notice how effortlessly she interacted with entrepreneurs, diplomats, and politicians, as if she had been born into that world. And perhaps, he thought, perhaps she had. Then he witnessed a scene that churned his stomach. She approached a table where a group of entrepreneurs was discussing green investments. One of them spoke skeptically about an ambitious project deep in the Amazon. "Too risky," he said. "Requires brutal initial investment, and there's no guarantee of return." Clara, with a half-smile, interjected. "Not necessarily. Some of the best-designed environmental projects have generated surprising returns. It all depends on the business model. For example, if you combine carbon credits with low-impact ecotourism, you can triple the investment in less than 5 years." There was a stunned silence. No one expected that level of analysis, much less coming from the mouth of a woman whom some still believed was there by chance. "Do you have data to back up that projection?" another curious entrepreneur asked. "Yes. 6 years ago, I designed a very similar model for a Canadian company. They exceeded their expectations in less than 3 years." Ethan, who had approached, pretending to look at the drink tray, felt a knot in his stomach. It was her. The same woman he had seen scrubbing his floors for 3 years. The one who picked up his shirts from the floor as if she had no history. The one who now spoke fluently of financial strategies and international markets with the most powerful men in the country. "Clara," one of the entrepreneurs said, clearly impressed, "you have to come back to the business world. It's a crime to let a mind like yours not lead something great." Maria, who had also joined the group, nodded enthusiastically. "You should consider opening your own consultancy. With your experience, it would be a success from day one." And it was then that Ethan felt a bitter truth explode in his face. He had had one of the country's brightest minds in his house for years, and not only had he ignored her, he had belittled her. He had given her orders without looking her in the eyes. He had treated her as invisible. Near 11 o'clock that night, as the last guests began to leave, Robert Sinclair approached Ethan with a serious expression. "Ethan, I need a word with you." Alone. They discreetly moved to a corner of the ballroom. "Listen to me closely. I don't know what kind of professional relationship you have with Clara, but I hope you realize the treasure you have before you. I'm not exaggerating. She is one of the most intelligent and well-connected women I know. If you have any vision, you'll bring her in as a partner or consultant. She will change your life. Literally." Ethan swallowed hard. "And one more thing," Robert added in a lower but firm voice. "Clara is a woman of integrity. Even when she's hurt, she never strikes back. But if you don't treat her as she deserves, I will be the one to demand it from you. Personally." The threat was not veiled. It was clear. Sinclair, one of the most influential men in the country, had just made it clear that Clara was under his protection. "I understand," Ethan murmured. "You'd better." When the last car left the driveway, and the music completely faded, only the two of them remained in the house. Clara was collecting some forgotten glasses, as if everything that had happened that night hadn't changed a thing. "Clara, stop," Ethan said in a soft voice she had never heard from him before. She turned, glasses still in hand. "What's wrong, Mr. Vance?" "I want to talk about these 3 years, about how I treated you, about who you really are." She set the glasses on a table, said nothing, waited. "I didn't know," he finally confessed. "I had no idea who you were when you came into my house, and if I had known, well, I suppose it wouldn't have changed anything either." And there it was, the truth. Clara nodded slightly. "Exactly. You judged me by what you thought I was. You looked down on me because you believed you were worth more. Knowing I was rich doesn't change the fact that you judge people by what they have, not by who they are." Ethan lowered his gaze. For the first time in a long time, he felt genuine shame. "I want to make it up to you," he said. "I want to offer you a position as a senior consultant in the company, a salary commensurate with your experience, a share in the profits." "And why now?" she interrupted him coldly. "Because your friends validated me?" Ethan didn't know how to respond. Any word sounded hollow. "I'll think about it," Clara finally said, "but not out of gratitude, and certainly not for your approval. If I accept, it will be on my terms." She began to walk up the stairs, but before leaving, she turned. "Tonight you learned something about me. I hope you also learned something about yourself." And she disappeared down the hallway. Ethan was left alone in the living room with the bitter certainty that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Perhaps, with luck, it wasn't too late to correct it. Given Clara's strength and Ethan's dawning realization, what do you predict will be the outcome of their professional relationship? Will she accept his offer? And on what terms? Share your thoughts below. Don't miss a single detail of this powerful transformation. Like this video and subscribe to our channel now. The next morning, Clara woke at 5, as usual, but she didn't get up to clean. She sat on the edge of the bed, in silence, trying to process everything that had happened. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't know exactly what her place was in that house. At 6:30, she went down to the kitchen, as always. But this time, she found Ethan already awake, drinking coffee alone at the table she usually served. He was in a robe, disheveled, and with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. "Good morning," she said, walking towards the cabinet where she kept her apron. "Clara, no." He stood up quickly. "There's no need. I mean, after last night." "After what?" She interrupted him calmly. "I still need this job, don't I? As far as I know, nothing has changed." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, uncomfortable. "After what I learned about you, about who you are, I'm the same person I was yesterday," she interrupted calmly. "The only thing that's changed is what you know. That doesn't make me someone different." She began to prepare breakfast, but she no longer did it as before. It wasn't submission. It was efficiency. Professionalism. The mark of someone who does their job well because they choose to, not because they are ordered to. At 7:15, Ethan's phone vibrated. It was Sinclair. "Ethan, we need to talk. Urgent. I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up before Ethan could answer. Ethan looked at Clara, who was setting the table as usual, only now he saw her with different eyes. Sinclair, huh? He murmured. I imagine it's about the Asian expansion, she replied, without even looking at him. How do you know that? You were serving drinks at the next table. And even if you didn't see me, I was there. I always was. Over the years, Clara had perfected a little-valued skill, listening without anyone noticing she was paying attention, a useful talent when your job is to be present, yet invisible. That morning, in the still dim kitchen, she paused as she dried a cup and looked at Ethan with a mix of calm and certainty. You were talking about investments in Singapore, weren't you? I might be wrong, but I think Robert's visit isn't just friendly chatter. It looks like he wants to talk about a possible partnership. Ethan looked up, surprised. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. 20 minutes later, Robert Sinclair entered the house accompanied by Charles Montgomery. Both walked with firm strides, speaking in low tones, like two men who had already decided everything. Ethan received them in the main living room, trying to maintain his composure. Clara discreetly appeared with a tray of coffee and pastries, as on so many other occasions. She moved naturally, with that quiet, serene air that seemed to envelop everything. But something had changed. This time, she wasn't invisible. This time, the guest stood up. Clara, Robert said, smiling as he saw her. It's a pleasure to see you. I hope you rested well after the party. Very well. Thank you, she replied, serving coffee with effortless elegance. We hope the evening was to your liking, Charles added courteously. It was unforgettable, Robert said, accepting the cup. But we've come to talk about something that goes far beyond a good party. Clara, as always, was about to leave after fulfilling her role, but this time Robert stopped her with a clear gesture. Please, stay. What we are going to discuss also directly concerns you. Ethan, who had begun to feel uncomfortable since they entered, shifted in his armchair. It was clear he wasn't finding it easy to see his employee included in high-level business conversations. We were talking about you last night, Clara, Robert continued. Charles and I believe it would be a genuine loss for someone like you to remain so far from the business world. That's very generous of you, she said neutrally. It's not generosity. It's vision, Charles added, taking the floor. We are setting up an investment fund focused on emerging markets in Latin America, and we need someone like you, with real experience, strategic vision, and international connections. Robert leaned forward with conviction. The position is executive director, starting salary, $500,000 a year. $500,000. Ethan felt his blood run cold. It was more than he had paid Clara in 3 years. Furthermore, Robert continued, we have contacts in London, in Paris. You could rebuild your networks in Europe in a matter of months. In 2 years, you would be exactly where you deserve to be. Clara remained silent for a few moments. She processed every word with the cold mind of a strategist, though inside her world trembled. Ethan, however, was livid. He knew he was about to lose something he had never truly valued, the brightest person he had ever had close to him. It's an exceptional offer, Clara finally said, but I need a couple of days to think about it. Of course, Charles said, smiling. But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come around every day. When they left, the mansion fell into a silence that weighed heavily, a screaming silence. Ethan began to pace the room like a caged lion, his nerves making him circle. 500,000, he muttered, more to himself than to her. More deserved than any you've ever paid in this house, Clara responded, as she collected the empty cups. It's a fair figure for that position. Clara, about what I proposed yesterday, we can renegotiate. Adjust the terms, Ethan said hopefully. She paused. With the tray still in her hands, she looked at him without hesitation. Are you offering me something now because you're afraid I'll accept their proposal? He didn't answer. You're not doing it because you recognize my worth. You're doing it because you're afraid of losing me. You know it, and I know it. Ethan lowered his gaze. He couldn't deny the truth, because that truth was devouring him. I recognize your worth, he whispered. Now? And where was that recognition during the last 3 years? Silence. Again. And that silence was the only answer Ethan had to give her. Clara continued tidying the room. Though anyone observing her closely would notice her mind was far away. Something was on her mind. Then, without warning, she stopped and asked, Can I ask you a question? Ethan, still confused by everything that was happening these days, nodded without much thought. Why did you invite me to the party? I mean, what exactly was your plan? He hesitated, but then, as if feeling there was no point in lying anymore, he confessed. I wanted you to feel out of place. I imagined my guests would see you as the employee trying to pretend to be what she wasn't, that they would laugh inside. I hoped that feeling of shame would make you remember your place, or at least the one I thought you occupied. Clara looked at him without surprise, only with a strange peace. Thank you for being honest, she said calmly. She finished putting the last things away and headed towards the door. Just before leaving, she turned and looked at him directly. Do you know the difference between you and Robert? Between you and Charles, too, if you ask me. Ethan said nothing. He waited. They see potential in people and want to empower it. You, on the other hand, see threats and do everything possible to neutralize them. That is the big difference between true leaders and those who just accumulate wealth. How do you think Clara's honesty about Ethan's true intentions will impact his self-perception and their potential future working relationship? Share your insights. Don't miss the powerful transformation. Like this video and subscribe to our channel now. That same afternoon, while Ethan was out in meetings, Clara received an unexpected visit. Maria Travers appeared at the door with her usual elegance, but this time her expression was firm, almost urgent. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said. Not at all. Come in, Clara responded, stepping aside. Both sat in the same living room, where, only a few hours earlier, Robert and Charles had made her an offer that could change her life. Maria took a deep breath. I haven't stopped thinking about what we discussed last night, about opportunities, and about rebuilding what we thought was lost. It was an intense night, wasn't it? It was, Clara replied sincerely. I want to tell you something, Maria began. 15 years ago, I was just an art teacher at a public school. I met my husband when he was a deputy, still far from being a minister. I remember that every time I accompanied him to political meetings, I felt small, out of place, as if I didn't fit into that world of suits and big words. Clara leaned forward, interested. And then a woman told me something I never forgot. She told me, Maria, you don't need to shrink your light for others to shine. Your intelligence, your sensitivity, your knowledge also have value. Maria smiled, touched. That woman was your mother. Sophia Sterling told me that at a charity dinner. And from that day on, it changed the way I saw myself. Clara's eyes welled up. It had been so long since anyone had mentioned her mother with such warmth and respect. My mother always knew how to uplift others, she said softly. And now you are doing the same, Maria said, moving a little closer. Last night, I saw Sophia Sterling's daughter re-emerge with strength. Don't let anyone make you believe you have to settle for less than your worth. At 6 in the afternoon, Ethan returned to the manor. He found Clara in the library, engrossed in an international economics book. She wore something simple but elegant, her hair loose, her feet crossed, her mind focused. "Are you studying?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She gently closed the book and looked at him. "I'm catching up on the European Union's new trade policies. If I accept Robert and Charles's proposal, I need to be up to date." "If you accept?" he repeated, almost anxiously. "I want to propose something to you," she said calmly. "Give me a week, just 1 week. I want to show you what I can bring to your company, not as an employee, as a consultant." Ethan remained thoughtful. She continued, "If at the end of that week you still don't see my value, I'll accept Robert's offer without looking back. But if you do see it, then we'll talk about working as equals, truly." He looked at her with a mix of respect and fear. That woman was no longer the same. "All right," he said in a hushed voice, "but with one condition. During that week, you won't clean or serve coffee. You'll only work as a consultant." Clara smiled, and it was a genuine smile, the first Ethan had seen from her in 3 years. They shook hands, and in that instant, both knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The assistant had died the night of the party. The person who was there now was Clara Sterling, a woman determined to prove that true phoenixes not only rise from their ashes, but do so stronger. What specific challenges and transformations do you anticipate for both Ethan and Clara during this 1-week trial period? Share your predictions. Don't miss the culmination of their journey. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for the final chapter. Monday began at 7 o'clock sharp. Clara was seated in Ethan's main office with piles of financial documents in front of her. She had requested access to all reports from the last 5 years of Vance construction. Ethan watched her from the doorway, uncomfortable. "Have you found anything interesting?" he asked, poorly disguising his unease. She looked up, her expression firm. "May I speak with complete frankness?" "Of course. Your company has been stagnant for 3 years. Growth is practically non-existent. Last year, you lost 2 key contracts, and you're still repeating investment strategies that worked in 20 but make no sense in 24. The words were like a sledgehammer. Ethan knew it deep down. But hearing it so clearly, so bluntly, hurt him. "And what would you do?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. Clara stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. "First, diversify. Domestic civil construction is saturated. Second, innovate. Sustainability is no longer an option, it's a requirement. And third, seek international alliances." She turned back to him. "But before I give you solutions, I need to understand one thing. Why do you make such conservative decisions? You have capital, you have a reputation, you have infrastructure. Why do you act with fear?" There was a long silence. "Because I'm afraid," Ethan finally admitted. "Afraid of losing everything, like my father did, like other entrepreneurs who bet big and lost." "I understand," Clara said softly. "But that's the difference. Your father bet when he was already against the ropes. You could do it from a position of stability. You're not playing to win. You're playing not to lose." She walked back to the table, spread out some documents, and pushed them towards him. "I'm going to show you something in the next 2 hours that can change the way you see your business, but only if you're willing to listen." And for the first time in a long time, Ethan was. Clara unfolded a plan that left Ethan speechless, literally with his mouth agape. It was an expansion proposal for emerging markets in Latin America, based on sustainable construction and social housing. The plan included partnerships with local governments, external financing, and innovative technologies. Everything fit. Every piece made sense. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked, still processing what he had heard. "From my father, at Harvard. I got an MBA at 22, but above all, I learned by managing the family business." She paused. "Information you would have had if you had ever bothered to talk to the woman who cleaned your house on Tuesdays." That same day, Clara organized a video call with 3 potential international partners, all acquaintances from her time at Sterling Industries. Ethan watched her, fascinated. She spoke English and Spanish with enviable fluidity. She addressed the Mexican businessman naturally. "I understand your concern about the deadlines, but I'm convinced we can find a solution that benefits both parties." In just 40 minutes, Clara had secured an in-person meeting in Mexico City for the following week, and preliminary interest in a project valued at $2 million. "How did you do that?" Ethan asked, still in shock. "Luis Martinez and I were partners on a project in Chile 8 years ago. He lost everything. Then he looked for me. And although we couldn't work together anymore, we always maintained professional respect." She calmly closed her laptop. "True relationships survive economic crises, and he doesn't care if I spent 3 years cleaning houses." When she looked at him with a mix of compassion and firmness. In the international business world, what counts is competence, integrity, and results. It doesn't matter if you spent 3 years cleaning or 3 years in the next. What matters is if you know how to do the job. Wednesday brought another dose of reality. Clara presented a meticulous analysis of the competition. With updated charts and data, she exposed the weaknesses of other companies and the opportunities Ethan had ignored. Santos Construction is in serious liquidity problems. Last week they lost a $50 million contract. It's the perfect time to get ahead and approach their clients. "How do you know that?" "That information isn't public." Clara smiled, a glint in her eye. "Patricia Santos was my classmate at Harvard. We still talk occasionally." Ethan shook his head, impressed. "You have a network of contacts I wouldn't acquire in 20 years. 30, she corrected him. "And some of those contacts would never be within your reach, no matter how long you waited." "Why not?" "Because they are people who value character more than money, and character isn't built in an afternoon." On Thursday, she organized a meeting with all department heads. Ethan watched her in silence as she took control of the room with a confidence that disarmed even the most veteran employees. "The engineering department is still using 10-year-old technology," she told the responsible manager bluntly. "Meanwhile, our competitors are already working with modular construction and 3D printing." "But those investments cost millions," the man protested. "And not investing costs us tens of millions in lost contracts?" Clara retorted without hesitation. "You're thinking about costs, not opportunities." She turned to the financial manager. "We have $5 million tied up in low-yield funds. That money could finance the modernization of the technical area." "But it would be a risk," he intervened. "Everything is a risk. The difference is whether you choose risks that can multiply your income, or the certainty of remaining stagnant until the competition erases you from the map." Ethan said nothing. He watched, aware of something uncomfortable. Clara, in 1 week, was doing what he hadn't achieved in years. At the end of the meeting, alone again, he dared to ask what tormented him. "Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me after how I treated you?" Clara was tidying some papers on the table when she replied, without looking at him. "Because it's also a test for me. In these 3 years, I came to doubt myself, my abilities. I wondered if I still knew how to analyze markets, negotiate, lead. This week is proving to me that I haven't lost anything. On the contrary, having rebuilt my life from scratch gave me something I didn't have before. the perspective of someone who has learned that survival develops skills that comfort never gives you. She paused. I learned to be resilient, adaptable, and humble, and that has made me a better businesswoman than I was at 25. On Friday, Clara handed him a 40-page report. It wasn't just anything. It was a complete restructuring of the company, from internal operations to global expansion strategies. With this plan, you can increase revenue by 300% in 2 years, she said, giving him the printed copy. Ethan slowly turned the pages. Each section showed a level of analysis he had never seen in his own company. Clara, this is extraordinary, and it's realistic, because it's based on concrete data, real contacts, and actions I can implement right now. When he reached the last page, he was speechless. There was a partnership proposal, division of roles, profits, shared structure. You want to be my partner? He asked, almost disbelieving. I want us to be partners. Your company needs renewal. I need a platform to rebuild my career. We can help each other. And why here? Robert and Charles offered you much more. She stood, walked to the window, and looked at the city from above. Because they want me to do what I already know how to do. You are giving me the opportunity to prove I can go beyond. And besides, there's something deeply poetic about rebuilding my life right in the place where I hit rock bottom. Ethan watched her in silence. There was something about her, beyond ambition, a strength born from the ashes. And if I don't accept, if I think it's too risky, then you'll continue to be the man who prefers to humiliate his employees rather than recognize their talent. And I'll accept Robert's offer on Monday. And if I accept, then we'll discover what's possible when talent and resources work together instead of against each other. Ethan looked at the report. Then he looked at her. Then he looked at the city. In just 1 week, a woman he considered his cleaning lady had proven she could change the destiny of his company. Just one more question, he said, almost in a whisper. All this time, were you watching me? Analyzing my mistakes? Planning this? Clara shook her head. No, Ethan. During those 3 years, I was just trying to survive, day by day. I stopped thinking like a businesswoman, until that night of the party, when I remembered who I really was, and I also remembered who you were. Clara smiled with the confidence only someone who has found their way back home possesses. She wasn't a woman born to clean houses, but to build empires. Then she posed the question that changed everything. Do you want to build one with me? Ethan extended his hand, and as they shook, they knew they weren't just signing a contract. They were closing a cycle of humiliations and opening a new chapter where respect and competence would be the foundation of everything that came next. From the window, the city unfolded like a field of infinite possibilities. And for the first time in 3 years, Clara Sterling looked at the future without fear. What profound impact do you think Clara's test and Ethan's eventual acceptance will have on his leadership style and the future culture of Vance Construction? Share your thoughts below. Don't miss the final inspiring chapter. Like this video and subscribe to our channel now. 6 months after that handshake that sealed their alliance, Clara stood on the terrace of the gleaming Vance Sterling International Development Office, gazing at the same Crestwood city that had once rejected her and now celebrated her anew. The company's name shone in golden letters on the building's facade, more than a sign, a symbol of resurrection. Her desk phone rang insistently. It was Carla, her new executive assistant, an efficient young woman whom Clara had hired not only for her talent, but for that inner fire of resilience she recognized in herself. Ms. Sterling, the French ambassador is on line 2. He wants to confirm the meeting to discuss the housing project in Marseille. Please put him through." Clara adjusted the designer jacket she had bought last week, not to show off, but because she could finally dress as she had always dreamed. "Mr. Dubois." "A pleasure," she greeted in impeccable French. "I hope all is well." In those 6 months, her life had changed at dizzying speed. The pilot project in Mexico, which she negotiated in her first week as a consultant, was a resounding success and brought with it 3 more international contracts. The company that Ethan had managed alone, and which had barely grown, now multiplied its revenues by 4 and had a presence in 5 countries. But economic growth was only part of the story. What truly mattered was what had happened with the people. Ethan entered her office without knocking, a habit they had acquired in the first few months. Despite the inversion of power between them, a genuine collaboration existed, based on mutual respect. "The Mexicans have approved the project expansion," he said, waving a paper. "Another 15 million. And the project in Chile is approved too, with all the tax incentives you negotiated." Clara smiled. She remembered when Ethan doubted the risky countries she proposed. Now he himself sought opportunities abroad. He had learned basic Spanish and was planning a trip to Europe to explore alliances with German companies. "Ethan," she said, sitting across from him, accustomed now to her directness. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. I'm sure you regret how things were." Ethan was silent for a few seconds, gazing out the panoramic window that spanned the entire city. "Every day," he replied. "Not just for how I treated you, but for losing 3 years being someone who wasn't me. And who were you? A small man who needed to belittle others to feel big. Someone who confused having money with having worth." She looked him in the eyes. "You taught me the difference between being rich and being prosperous." "What's the difference?" "Being rich is having money. Being prosperous is creating value, developing people, building something that lasts longer than you." Then Carla interrupted over the intercom. "Ms. Sterling, the flowers you ordered have arrived." "What flowers?" Ethan asked, curious. "Today marks 1 year since my parents' passing." Clara explained that every anniversary she would visit the cemetery with simple flowers, bought with the little money she had then. "This year, for the first time, I can bring imported roses, as they deserved." Ethan stood up. "Would you like me to accompany you? It would be an honor." An hour later, they stood before the graves of Giuseppe and Sophia Sterling in Evergreen Cemetery. Clara knelt and arranged the white roses with hands that trembled slightly with emotion. "Mom, Dad," she whispered, "I've come home." Ethan respectfully stood back, but he could hear her continue. "I couldn't save the company you built, but I've built something new, something that honors the values you taught me. I discovered that true legacy isn't money, but the ability to start from scratch." She rose with tears in her eyes, but they were tears of peace, not of pain. She knew they would be proud. Ethan simply said, "I know." Upon returning to the office, they found an unusual atmosphere. Robert Sinclair and Charles Montgomery were waiting in reception, accompanied by other prominent business figures whom Clara recognized instantly. Robert approached with a wide, confident smile. "We're right on time." "Why?" she asked curiously. "For the meeting we scheduled 3 weeks ago about the merger of our investment firms." Clara and Ethan exchanged a knowing look. For the past few weeks, they had been exploring the idea of a strategic alliance that could change everything, to transform Vance into Sterling, from a regional firm into a global player. It was a bold leap, ambitious, almost a dream to achieve. Clara couldn't help but smile. In the main meeting room, they spent 3 intense hours. The result was far greater than they had imagined 6 months prior, an international consortium dedicated to sustainable development, with an initial capital of $100 million. Clara would be the executive president, Ethan would take the position of chief operating officer, Robert would lead investments, and Charles would handle government relations. "It's almost surreal," Charles commented during the coffee break. "A year ago, you were in a completely different place, and now you're leading one of Latin America's largest development projects. Sometimes life places us exactly where we need to be, to learn what we must learn." Clara responded with a warm smile. "And what you learn is that free fall can also be flight, if you know how to use your wings." When everyone left and Clara was alone in the office, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a photo she had kept since her first day as a partner. It was the same one she had found in Ethan's library, a magazine image of her appearing as one of Brazilian high society's most elegant women. But this time, there was a second photo glued to the first. It was a recent Forbes article titled "The Rebirth of Clara Sterling, From Lost Heiress to Innovative Entrepreneur." In the image, Clara was at a project in Mexico, wearing a hard hat and vest, supervising the construction of housing for low-income families. The two photographs told the same story from different angles. In the first, elegance was given by expensive clothes and luxury. In the second, by the dignity of work with purpose and meaning. Her phone rang. It was Elena, the Italian seamstress who had lent her that red dress for the party that changed everything. "Bambina, I saw the article in Forbes, and I can't help but cry with joy." "Elena," Clara said, touched, "you were key in all of this." "Don't exaggerate," Elena replied. "I only lent you the dress. The courage to wear it was all yours." She hung up, and Clara looked out the window just as she saw Ethan leaving the building. He too had changed a lot in these months. He was spoken of as a more humane leader, an ethical businessman, a generous person. It wasn't just Clara who had changed. It was 7 in the evening when Carla appeared with an envelope a motorcycle messenger had delivered. "Here you go, miss. It's urgent." Clara opened the envelope and found an elegant invitation with the letterhead of the Brazilian Business Foundation. She was invited to receive the Entrepreneur of the Year award at a ceremony to be held in the same hotel where, years ago, she had organized charity events as heiress to the Sterling family. The circle was closing, but this time when she took the stage, it wouldn't be as someone who inherited a legacy. It would be as someone who built it from scratch, who hit rock bottom and climbed back to the top with only her own hands and mind. The woman who stepped onto that stage was infinitely stronger than the spoiled heiress who had lost everything years ago. The ceremony took place 3 weeks later at the Grand Havenwood Hotel, the very place where Clara had organized some of the most important charity events of the previous decade. Irony of fate, poetic justice. She didn't know. Clara arrived in a navy blue dress designed by Elena Marchetti, who insisted on creating something special for the occasion. It wasn't an ostentatious designer gown she had worn before, but it had something far more valuable: authenticity. Every stitch reflected affection and faith in her journey. Ethan accompanied her in a classic tuxedo, elegant but visibly nervous. He was used to seeing her lead meetings and close multi-million-dollar contracts. But tonight was different. It was public recognition of both their transformations. "Nervous?" Clara asked as they ascended the main staircase. "Curious," he replied. "Last time I was here, you were a different person. I want to see how you feel coming back as who you are now." The ballroom was packed with the country's business elite. Many faces were familiar from her time with the Sterlings. Others were new, people who only knew her story from the media in recent months. But all looked at her with genuine respect, not with the morbid gaze of someone observing a tragedy. Maria Travers was among the first to congratulate her. "My dear Clara, What a special night. Your mother would be beaming to see you receive this award. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for reminding me who I was in my youth, she replied with emotion. Robert Sinclair and Charles Montgomery arrived shortly after, accompanied by their wives and some of the country's most important investors. Vance Sterling has become the most talked about success story in the market, Robert commented. Everyone wants to meet the woman behind this transformation. I have to confess something, Robert said sincerely. When I offered you that position in my company, I thought I was being generous. Now I realize you did me a favor by rejecting it. What you and Ethan have built is so much bigger than anything I could have done. Sometimes the best path isn't the most obvious, Clara replied. I needed to prove to myself that I could still build something from scratch. The ceremony began at 8 in the evening. Clara was the last to be called to the stage, the grand finale of the night. The presenter began to tell her story, and she felt an unprecedented mix of pride and humility. Clara Sterling represents the best of Brazilian entrepreneurship, the voice on the microphone declared. A woman who faced the toughest adversity and turned it into triumph, defeat into learning, a fall into a springboard to fly higher. When she went up to receive the trophy, Clara looked at the audience and saw hundreds of faces filled with sincere admiration. In the back, she identified some Vance Sterling employees who had come to honor her, and in the front row, Ethan applauded with a proud smile. Taking the microphone for her speech, she said, "My first impulse was to refuse to accept this award. How could someone who spent 3 years cleaning houses receive recognition for business excellence?" A murmur ran through the room. Many knew her story, but few expected her to be so honest about her recent past. But then I understood that was precisely the reason to accept it. This award doesn't just celebrate success. It celebrates the human capacity to start anew, to reinvent oneself, to turn what seemed like an end into an unexpected starting point. She paused, looking directly at Ethan. In these past months, I had learned that leadership, true success, is not about dominating others, but about using that power to uplift them. One of the most important men in her journey was there, in front of everyone, perfectly representing that transformation. Ethan couldn't help but be moved as she continued. Ethan Vance made mistakes with me, yes, but he also had the courage to recognize them and the wisdom to change. Today, we are partners not only in business, but in the mission to demonstrate that true success is measured by the positive impact we leave on the world. The audience erupted in sincere applause. Clara raised the trophy, but not as an individual triumph. That symbol represented a collective metamorphosis, a second chance, forgiveness, and shared growth. After the ceremony, during the cocktail reception, dozens of people approached Clara. Young entrepreneurs seeking advice, investors interested in alliances, journalists requesting interviews. But the conversation that moved her most was with a girl about 25 years old, who shyly introduced herself as Sophia. "Ms. Sterling," she said, "I wanted to thank you. Thank you for showing me that you can start from scratch. I lost everything 2 years ago when my family's company went bankrupt. Since then, I've worked as a waitress to make ends meet. Your story has given me the hope to start over." Clara took her hand, seeing herself reflected in that young woman, remembering who she had been 3 years ago. Another Sophia. "I'll give you some advice," she told her. "Don't expect to be who you were before. Work to become who you can be. The adversity you face now is teaching you lessons you would never learn in comfort. Use it as an advantage. Starting from scratch when you've lost everything, doing it with dignity, accepting any honest job and doing it well, observing, learning, creating real connections, and above all, not letting circumstances define who you are inside. Clara pulled a business card from her purse. "Look me up on Monday," she said. "Perhaps at our company. There's a place for someone eager to start over." When the party ended, Clara and Ethan left the hotel together. Outside, the Crestwood city night was beautiful, with a soft sea breeze. "Thank you," Ethan said. "For what?" she asked. "For giving me the opportunity to be a better person. For not judging me for my mistakes. For teaching me that it's never too late to change." They walked in silence along the Grand Havenwood sidewalk. Clara looked at the ocean and thought of the times she had walked that same beach in the last 3 years, feeling lost and aimless. "Ethan, can I confess something?" she said. "For a long time I hated you, not just for how you treated me, but because you represented everything I had lost. You had everything I wanted: money, status, respect. And now I realize you gave me something much more valuable than all that. The opportunity to discover who I truly am when appearances fade. In these 3 years, I learned that my strength wasn't in my bank account or my surname, it's in something much deeper." They stopped in front of the hotel where it all began, at that fateful party. "If you could go back," Ethan asked, "would you change anything?" Clara thought for a moment before answering. "I would change how my parents died. I would change the pain they felt when they lost everything. But the rest, everything that happened brought me here, and here is exactly where I'm meant to be." 6 months later, Clara was in the office reading a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from Sophia, the young woman she met at the ceremony. She had been promoted to Special Projects Manager at Vance Sterling, and now coordinated the opening of a new branch in Silverwood. "Have you created a monster?" Ethan joked, reading the letter over her shoulder. "In 6 months, she'll want to be your partner too." "It would be an honor," Clara smiled. "The world needs more people willing to start from scratch." She put the letter in the drawer next to the photos that told her story. But now there was a third image. It was from the inauguration of a pediatric hospital in Golden Coast, funded entirely by Vance Sterling's profits. In the photo, Clara was cutting the ribbon surrounded by smiling children. It was the perfect image of who she had become. Not just a successful businesswoman, but someone who used that success to leave a positive mark on the world. Outside the window, the city stretched out like an infinite ocean of possibilities. And Clara Sterling, the woman who had hit rock bottom and climbed back to the top, smiled, knowing that the best part of her story was yet to be written. Because when you learn that you can survive the freefall, you discover that you can actually fly. Did you enjoy this video? Then take a moment to subscribe to the channel and don't miss anything that's coming. Like to help us out and tell us in the comments what you thought. I love hearing your opinions. Thank you so much for watching until the end. See you in the next video.